Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Inshallah, in this segment, we'll continue reading about the etiquette of students of the Quran from Imam al-Nawawi's At-Tibyan fi Adabi Hamalat al-Quran, which I translated as Etiquette with the Quran. And there should be some links below the description that you can click to get more information about this book if you don't have it. Yesterday I started the section on the student's etiquette, and in order to ensure that everything is in one segment, maybe, I'm going to give a quick recap. I don't know if I can do all of it in one segment. It might be a little bit too long, but let's see. Okay, so yesterday Imam al-Nawawi said all of the teacher's etiquette that we have mentioned in and of itself are the student's etiquette also. The student's etiquette includes, moreover, avoiding any concerns that preoccupy him from achieving his objectives, except that which is unavoidable because of necessity. He should purify his heart from any impurity so that it is fit for receiving the Quran, memorizing it, and profiting from it. And the point has been made several times now that the heart needs to be purified to take maximum benefit of the Quran and to make it suitable for the Quran. And yet at the same time, also, as Quran is put into the heart, it will also have the effect of purifying the heart. Okay, so the student really needs to engage in this sort of self-purification, and it is the task of the teachers of the Quran to assist in this. The student should also show humility towards his teacher and be well behaved with him. Okay? Even if the teacher is younger than him, of a lower social status, etc., the student should be obedient to his teacher, consult him in his affairs, and accept his opinion. And I mentioned that this has to do with the expertise that the teacher may have that the student does not. Okay? And then we ended yesterday with a section on studying from the best. The student does not study except from someone whose competence has been shown to be complete. His religiosity is visible, he's achieved ma'rifah, and he is well known to be a person free of problems. And if you can't find someone like that, then study from the best person who is available. And the end of yesterday's session included a quotation attributed to Muhammad ibn Sirin, Malik ibn Anas, and many other of the Salaf al-Salih, who said, "This knowledge is religion, so examine well he from whom you take your religion." This is where we ended yesterday, and I made some comments on the statement, and it would be good to listen to the previous track to get those comments if you haven't done so already. So now let's move on to the new material. Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah says the student must look to his teacher with the eye of respect, believe in his competence completely and his superiority over his contemporaries, since this makes it more likely that he will benefit from him. So when you study with someone, you should seek out the most competent person that you can find, and you should believe that he is the best. Now, he doesn't necessarily have to be the best of the age, he just has to be the best for you. Remember, your knowledge is part of your rizq, and your rizq isn't going to be everywhere. It's going to be some places, and your knowledge will only be with some scholars, not all scholars. So yes, you should believe that whoever you're studying with is the superior person for you to study with. This is going to be more beneficial for you, and that you're not going to be doubting everything they said. Now, obviously, there's going to be some cases where maybe you ended up with the wrong teacher, but as a general rule, we should have confidence that the person that we end up with is the best teacher, at least for us. Okay, and Imam al-Nawawi explains, since this makes it more likely that he will benefit from him. By the way, this also hints that before you start studying with someone, you really need to do your homework. Don't study with someone just because they're teaching. Ask friends. Do some sort of investigation to make sure that the person is qualified. And remember, at the beginning, he said that you only study with someone whose competence is complete, his religiosity visible, and these are things that you're going to know through the person's reputation. Okay, who has achieved ma'rifah, again, reputation, looking at how people behave, what they talk about, and is also well known to be a person free of problems. Okay, so you need to know something about the teacher before you go and study with them. And once you've done this test and you begin studying, that's when you start having this idea in your head that they're the superior person for you to be studying with, because it makes it more likely that you will benefit from them. One scholar from the earlier generations would give something in charity whenever he went to his teacher and say, "O Allah, cover my teacher's faults from me, and do not take the spiritual blessing of his knowledge away from me." So notice here, a practice in the early generations is that they would give charity, and then they would make a supplication. And the reason these two are tied together is that a supplication is more likely to be accepted and answered after an act of charity or another pious work. So on the way to class, they would give charity, and then they would make dua, "O Allah, cover my teacher's faults from me." Notice, cover my teacher's faults from me. The early Muslims had no problem admitting that they were studying from people who were fallible. And this idea that we look to our shuyukh as though they're infallible transmitters or sources of knowledge, it doesn't exist amongst the scholars. They were aware that they were getting knowledge that was most likely correct from people who were most likely correct, but there was always the possibility that they weren't. Okay? They understood this, and the claim that we treat our scholars as though they're infallible and that their knowledge is infallible is bunk. It's not something that you're going to find amongst the scholars themselves. Okay, so, "O Allah, cover my teacher's faults from me, and do not take the spiritual blessing of his knowledge away from me." Okay, because if you saw one of your teacher's faults, it's going to make it difficult for you to benefit from him, and it would also take away the blessing that you would have received in the knowledge had you not know about his fault. Okay, so don't expose his faults to me. I know he makes mistakes, but don't show them to me. One, keep it private, so that it's just between him and you, O Allah, and keep it away from me so that I can still benefit in the way that you want me to benefit from him. Okay, so this is a dua that you should make when you go to class. Make a little bit of charity, do a good act, supplicate to Allah that your teacher doesn't display any faults in front of you, and that you get the maximum benefit from his lesson. Okay, how many of us make dua before we go to the lesson? And how many of us just depend on the sheikh giving a little dua before he begins? Start making dua before you go, and take a look at how much more you get out of it. It's definitely going to be better for your heart. All right, Rabi'a, the companion of Imam Shafi, and may Allah have mercy on them both, said, "I did not venture to drink water while Shafi was looking at me out of veneration for him. During their time, it was a way of showing respect. In our time, perhaps it's something we really don't understand. We have different ways of showing respect to people that we consider to be superior to us. But in their time, this apparently was one way. So out of shyness, he didn't even want to drink water in front of him. All right, we relate that the commander of the faithful, Ali ibn Abi Talib, may Allah be pleased with him, said, "The rights the teacher has over you as a student include that you give greeting to people in general, but single him out with greetings. So when you enter an assembly, you're going to give salams to everyone, and then you're going to give salams just to the teacher." And this is something that Imam al-Nawawi explains, I think, on the next page. Okay, they include sitting in front of him, not pointing with your hand in his company, not winking your eye at someone, not citing a position contrary to him. Now, the ones that were just listed before this last one, okay, so you don't do things that indicate that you're distracted, you don't fidget, you don't distract other people. And this thing about not citing a position contrary to his, Imam al-Nawawi returns to this later on, and what he's talking about is when a sheikh gives you an opinion, you don't just say, "Yeah, but some other guy said something else." or that sheikh I studied with yesterday said something else. This is a very rude way to do it. Okay? Find a courteous and respectful way to ask him about the other opinion, but don't throw someone else's opinion in his face. Okay? It's rude. Find a courteous way of doing it and a respectful way of doing it. Not backbiting anyone when in his presence. This is something that's unlawful in general, but it becomes more unlawful in front of people of knowledge, especially given the context that you're gathering in. And they include not conferring with someone sitting near you while you are in his audience, not grabbing his garment, not being insistent when he has reservations about something, and not being inharmonious such that you become fed up with accompanying him for a length of time. Okay, so you don't become frustrated with the teacher and then cut off. You debate your teacher, the teacher wins, the teacher doesn't cave in to your opinion, so you get frustrated with him. I'm not going to study with him anymore. Don't do that. Continue studying with him. Now, something to notice is the thing about you don't grab onto his garment, you don't be insistent when he has reservations, don't be overbearing, okay? And don't pester him. This is a human being, treat him with respect, okay? Some people treat shuyukh in a way that, maybe it's appropriate with rock star groupies, who, I guess the rock stars don't mind getting molested, but this sort of behavior shouldn't be going on with your shuyukh. Don't touch, don't grab. Treat them like normal people with this regard, assuming you treat people nicely. Okay, the student should discipline himself with these characteristics that Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu reference to. Also, the student rebuts any backbiting of his sheikh whenever he is able, and he leaves that assembly if he is unable to do so. Now, you don't backbite in the presence of your sheikh. Well, you don't backbite in the presence of anyone. You rebut backbite of your sheikh. Well, actually, you're going to rebut backbiting of anyone when you can. And if someone backbites your sheikh, you're going to leave that area if you can. Well, if anyone backbites anyone else, you're supposed to leave, right? Okay? Backbiting is haram. That's the default. When someone backbites, you try to rebut it, try to bring out husna dhan about the person. And if you can't stop it, and if you can't at least try to reduce the situation, then you get up and you leave if you can. That's the general rule with everyone. But when it comes to the ulama, it's more emphatic to do so. And one of the reasons for this, even though Imam al-Nawawi doesn't mention it in this paragraph, he's mentioned it earlier, is that the flesh of the ulama is a poison. People who dig into the ulama are digging into the awliya of Allah. So not only are they committing backbiting, they're declaring war on Allah, and you know who's going to win that struggle. It's not going to be the backbiter. You don't want to witness this. You don't want to be collateral damage. Okay? When a sheikh or an alim is being unfairly and unjustifiably backbitten, stop it, rebut it, leave. You should be doing this with a normal Muslim who is upright, and it's more emphatic to do it with your own sheikh, just as you would feel compelled to do it when it comes to your own parents and siblings. Okay, so Imam al-Nawawi continues and he says, the student visits his sheikh with most excellent traits, keeping himself tidy with everything we have just mentioned concerning the teacher. A few pages back he mentioned about this, things like cleanliness, and he mentioned you should shower regularly, you should remove smells, you should remove the hair that the sunnah says that you should remove, regular use of the tooth stick. If you don't have one, brush your teeth, right? Use a mint, purify your breath, and a heart free of preoccupying matters. And I mentioned several times now that one of the best things that you can do is you go and pray 2 rak'ah. And that will be a good buffer between you and the distractions. Okay. He does not enter without seeking permission when the sheikh is in a place that requires permission. Let's say the sheikh has an office, or he has a room that he teaches out of his house. Knock before you enter. Ask before you enter. Okay, this needs to be done. Perhaps the sheikh is counseling someone and it's a private conversation. Perhaps the sheikh is with one of his close female relatives and you really shouldn't be intruding on that. All right, so when the sheikh is in a place where there might be some privacy, or at least it's not in direct gaze of the general public, get permission before you enter. And once you enter, single out the teacher with a greeting. Okay, so I mentioned earlier, when you enter an assembly, give salams to everyone and then give salams to the sheikh. Okay, single him out with a greeting. And also do this when you depart, just as it is related in the hadith. The first greeting, the first saying of Assalamu alaikum, is no more deserving than the second. So the first is when you enter, and the second is when you leave. So give salams when you enter, give salams when you leave. The student does not step over people and sits wherever the assembly's perimeter happens to be, unless the sheikh gives him permission to come forward, or he knows from the behavior of the other students that they prefer it. Okay, so when you come to a lesson and it's already going, join at wherever the circle ends. So if they're still forming a circle, a ring, and it's not complete, sit at the end of one of those rings. If the ring's been completed, start a new one. What you don't do is you don't jump over people so that you can sit closer. Okay, so you don't annoy people. First come, first served. Remember, I mentioned earlier that the sheikh is going to read to students in the order of their arrival. Why? Because the first person has, we want to be fair, right? So the first person came first, and he has more right because he's waited longer. Okay, that's one way to look at it. Okay, but when we talk about the assembly, the people that came first, shouldn't they get better access to the sheikh because they were the ones that bothered to show up in time and early? Let them sit first, not the latecomer, not the guy that came in 10 minutes into the lesson and then he jumps over people so he can be up in the first row and he can see the sheikh from 5 feet away. No. If you're late, you sit where the rows end, unless you see a gap that no one's filling. Okay, and you don't annoy anyone when you get up there. Okay, so the student does not step over people, and he sits wherever the assembly's perimeter happens to be, unless the sheikh gives him permission to come forward, or he knows from the behavior of other students that they prefer it. So perhaps the sheikh has a senior student, or perhaps the sheikh's father or close relative is showing up. If it's known that this is someone that the sheikh would want to sit closer to him, make a way, make a path, let him get up there. Okay, you'll notice that some of the etiquette here is the same as the etiquette for Yawm al-Jum'ah, and that's where a lot of it is being taken from, because this is somewhat analogous to when we show up for Yawm al-Jum'ah. He does not let someone rise from his place out of deference, and if someone does give him preference, he declines it, following the example of Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, unless his coming forward is in the welfare of those present, or if the sheikh requested him to do so. So if you're sitting closer to the sheikh and someone else comes in, don't give them your spot unless you have some afterlife related reason for doing so, like it's your dad or it's your mom. Okay, showing them respect and putting them there, yes, you can do that. But if it's just a friend, no, you keep your spot. And he's going to explain why. But what if the student that showed up late is the guy that reads for the sheikh? Get up, let him sit closer. Okay. He does not sit in the middle of the circle except out of necessity. So like if there's absolutely no other place to sit, then you would go over the front row and be in the middle of the circle. But when he says in the middle of the circle, I don't think that he means like absolutely in the center. I think he means like in front of the starting row. But I'm sure that if there's a necessity for being in the center, that yeah, that would be okay. Anyways, he does not sit between two companions except with their permission, and he does not make, and if they make room for him, he sits and squeezes himself in. Now, some of the things that were just mentioned in this paragraph, they're backed by textual evidence, but a lot of it just goes down to common sense and courtesy. Okay? So when you come to an assembly, use your discretion. Don't annoy people. Try to get in there causing a minimal amount of fuss and disturbance to other people, and inshallah, you'll do fine. The student should also have good etiquette with his companions and those attending the assembly of the sheikh, since this is also having good etiquette with the sheikh and preserves the dignity of his assembly. Okay, so remember that maintaining order in the assembly is a way of showing respect to the sheikh. If you start talking to the guy next to you, it's disrespect to the sheikh. It's also disrespect to the rest of the students, right? So if you're jabbering away with your friend or the guy next to you, then the person next to you guys probably can't hear what the sheikh is saying, and that's kind of why you're all there, right? So you're disrespecting the rest of the assembly, and you're also disrespecting the sheikh. When you disturb other people, please don't do that. And the student sits in the presence of the sheikh in the manner of a student, not that of a teacher. And this applies even in the case when a student goes to study from someone he himself studies from. And this happened a lot in the past, where someone who was already an accomplished sheikh of one field would go and study from someone who was a superior sheikh in another field. And guess what? Even though the guy who's the recognized sheikh of one field is going to study, he approaches it as a student, not as a teacher. Okay, so we need to be aware of what our roles are at all time. So the university professor who goes to learn tajweed, when you're studying tajweed, you're the student. You're not the university professor, you're not the cardiologist anymore, you're a student. So even if you're making a salary with a ton more zeros than the tajweed teacher, you gotta show him respect while you're in that sitting. You gotta respect him as a teacher in that sitting. You gotta respect that he's the expert in the sitting. Okay, maybe not the nicest example. I'm not trying to be mean to cardiologists, but the reason that I picked that one out is because of an event with one of my first teachers. I don't like telling personal anecdotes, and I don't like talking about other people, so I'll try not to identify them too much. But anyways, in Portland, Oregon, when I first started studying Islam as a Muslim, the sheikh that I studied with was definitely one of the most humble people I have, and whenever I read this book about the great character that we're supposed to have, I see that he had it. MashaAllah. He really was a contemporary living embodiment of the akhlaq and adab of the Quran that we're supposed to have. Okay, he was getting his PhD, so he wasn't yet finished with his studies. And I remember being at a social gathering, and it wasn't an ilm gathering, it was just a social gathering with Muslims. And one of the members of the community was a quite famous and a quite well-respected person of one of the highest respected medical specialties, and he treated the sheikh with deference. Even though he was a bigger person in his field, he still treated the sheikh with deference and respect. Okay, and it was amazing to see this. So anyways, I wandered. I really, if I could, I would edit that out, but part of the point of the live stream is that I have to get like used to, I guess, doing this type of stuff. So anyways, he sits in the presence of the sheikh in the manner of a student, not that of a teacher. He does not raise his voice exaggeratedly, laugh, or speak much without need. He does not fidget with his hands or the like, and he does not turn left and right without need. And may Allah forgive me because I notice I keep swinging back and forth in my chair. So, astaghfirullah. Okay, rather he faces the sheikh, attentive to his words. It's amazing that all of the adab that we're supposed to have with our shaykh and when they're students is the same adab I should be having with this camera, but I'm not. Anyways, we keep going. Among the things a student is advised to heed is that he not recite to the shaykh while the shaykh's heart is preoccupied or bored, or while he is reluctant, distressed, overjoyed, hungry, thirsty, tired, troubled, or anything that makes it difficult for him or prevents him from having complete presence of heart or from being energetic. The student should take full advantage of the times in which the teacher is energetic. If you want evidence for all of these, when you study fiqh, one of the last chapters you would probably get, if you're a Shafi'i or you're a Hanbali, and I'm not sure where it occurs in the other madhabs, but one of the last chapters you're going to get, and it's typically the penultimate chapter, has to do with courts and judges. And when you get into that section on the adab, or the proper behavior of the judge, they're going to talk about how a judge should not pass judgment when he's angry, when he's excessively hungry, or when it's really hot, or he's in any situation or condition that would distract him. That right there is the source for the rulings here. And some books would even mention that everything we just said about the judge applies also to muftis and teachers of knowledge. And so people have sometimes asked me a few times about what that means, or what does it apply to. Well, there we go. Here's where Imam al-Nawawi talks about it. Okay, so you don't read with your shaykh and you don't study with your shaykh when they're clearly preoccupied with this, with other things that would distract them, right? And the student should take full advantage of the times in which the shaykh is energetic. So if you find the shaykh is in a really, really good mood and he's in a position where he's very giving, take advantage of it. The student's etiquette includes bearing with the shaykh's coarseness and bad aspects of his character and not being dissuaded from remaining with him and believing in his aptness. Now notice that this is a two-way street. Earlier, Imam al-Nawawi, when talking about the etiquette of teachers, he said that teachers need to bear with the students' gruffness and coarseness and all of that. And likewise, students need to do the same towards their shuyukh. We're all works in progress, right? We're going to have to put up with some occasional bad behavior from other people. We need to do this with our students. We need to do this with our shaykhs. Right? People have bad days. We need to acknowledge this. The student prefers valid excuses for his shaykh's actions and utterances that outwardly seemed flawed. Out of employing husna dhan, we're going to try to find reasons why the person was excused for what they did. Okay, and who is incapable of this except for someone with little or no accomplishment who can't find reasons to excuse someone else's poor behavior. If the shaykh is coarse with him, okay, excuses like what? Maybe he saw a car crash on the way to the lesson and this has brought about a state in him where he's remembering the afterlife, or he remembers one of his loved ones who had a similar crash, and because of that, he's really not with it today. Find an excuse, okay? So who is incapable of this except for someone with little or no accomplishment and no imagination? If the shaykh is coarse with him, he takes the initiative to apologize to the shaykh and outwardly shows that the offense is his and he deserves the reprimand. This is more beneficial to him in this world and the next, and the purer for the heart of the shaykh. Now up until this last part about and purer for the heart of the shaykh, why is it better for him in this world and the next? What's the basis for this? Well, we can remember there's some hadiths where the Prophet ﷺ talks about how if two people are having a dispute, the one that comes forward and tries to fix things, he has more thawab than the other guy. And we find many other examples where someone who tries to end a dispute, even if they were wrong, and even if they're a third party, they're going to get massive rewards for it. So look at it from that perspective. If the shaykh is coarse with him, he takes the initiative to apologize to the shaykh. Okay, it's my fault. And outwardly shows that the offense is his, and he deserves a reprimand. Okay, it was my fault. I'm sorry, Sheikh. And in the back of your mind, your nafs, of course, is whispering, no, it's actually his fault. Okay? But the good side of you, yeah, maybe it is his fault, but you know what? He had to have an excuse for it. Anyways, okay? So this is more beneficial for him in the world than the next. It's more beneficial in the next because you're going to get thawab. It's more beneficial in this world also because by you initiating the rectification of this situation, he's going to teach you, right? And you'll be able to move forward. And it's pure for the heart of the sheikh because it's not going to be stuck in there anymore. So anyways, I'm sure that we can look back on our lives and we can find many events where you and one of your friends are having a dispute. You know your friend was wrong. Excuse me, your friend knows that you were wrong and you know you were wrong, but your friend comes to you and he goes, you know what, it was my fault, let's move forward. You move forward, everything's done, life goes on, water under the bridge, and everything's great, okay? And your hearts get rectified. Enough of an explanation. Look in your own lives. I'm sure you can find ample examples where you have done this. All right. It has been said, whoever is impatient with the humiliation of learning will spend his life in the blindness of ignorance, and whoever is patient with it, okay, patient with learning, it will eventually lead to the glory of this life and the next. Okay, whoever is impatient with the humiliation of learning. Why are you learning? You're learning because you're ignorant, right? When you learn, it's going to take a lot of effort. You got to get up early, you got to go to class, you got to study, you got to do the material. You're going to have to show other people that you don't know what you are there studying about, right? All of this can be very humiliating. Okay, so whoever is impatient with the humiliation of learning will spend his life in the blindness of ignorance, because without humility you can't get out of that state of ignorance, right? It takes a certain amount of humility to acknowledge that you don't know. And there's no way that you're going to remove your not knowing and your ignorance without acknowledging that you need to learn something. Okay, and whoever is patient with it, with learning, it will eventually lead to the glory of this life and the next. Glory of this life, respect from other people, the prestige of knowing knowledge, being an exemplar for other people. Right? We can find lots of ways to explain this that are wholesome and good, okay, as well as glory in the next. Well, in the first couple of chapters of this book, we read about the intense merits of learning the Quran and teaching the Quran. We also read about how when you recite in the dunya, in the afterlife, your recitation is going to come and intercede on your behalf. And in the afterlife, you will be told to recite. And as you recite, and in a manner similar to how you recite, you will ascend higher and higher and higher up in Jannah. So those are ways that it can be a glory in the next. Okay, in the student's etiquette, and also how can it be a glory in this life? Well, when you learn sacred knowledge, one of the things you're learning is how to prepare for the grave and for the afterlife, right? So it's going to teach you how to navigate through this life into the next. It's going to help you make the right decisions at the right time and the right way. Okay, so perhaps that's a way that we can look at it as being a glory in this life. So anyways, the student's etiquette encompasses a famous statement of Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with them both. I was humble when I studied, so I was respected when I was sought. How excellent is the one who said, whoever does not experience the taste of humility for an hour will spend eternity humiliated. And how is he going to spend eternity humiliated? Because he will never improve and he will forever remain ignorant. Okay? Well, at least in the dunya, right? How about in the akhirah? Well, if he never learns what he needs to know from personally obligatory religious knowledge, if he doesn't learn as far the line, then what's going to happen to him in the akhirah? If he had the opportunity to learn it, but he didn't, for whatever reason, then his akhirah isn't going to look so great. I'm not saying he's going to be in hellfire eternity. May Allah forgive us. He says a mu'min, it's not going to happen. but his station won't be anywhere as high as those who did get a little bit of knowledge. Okay? Whoever does not experience the taste of humility for an hour, remember this has to do with acknowledging that you're ignorant and going and studying, will spend eternity humiliated. The student's etiquette includes his determination to study, incessantly doing so anytime the opportunity arrives. MashaAllah, one of the last sheikhs that I studied with in Syria, we couldn't go anywhere without him having a book. So we would go, he would invite us, for example, to go to a picnic at his brother's farm, and he would bring along a book, and he would be reading out of the book. And you could either read with him, and he was fine with that, or you could go off and you could enjoy the picnic at the garden, whatever. But everywhere he went, he had something that he could study out of, and he never wasted a moment of time when he could be learning more. He is not satisfied with a little when much is possible. He does not burden himself with what is overbearing to him out of fear of boredom and losing what he has gained. He varies, and this varies according to different people and conditions. Okay, I mentioned earlier that we have to acknowledge that sometimes we need a little bit of entertainment in order to become invigorated again. Fine, moderation with this is totally cool if it's going to have that positive outcome. But we're not going to waste any time. If 10 minutes of entertainment is enough to bring you back, if 10 minutes of distraction is enough to reset your mind, allow you to focus, then just do 10 minutes. Don't do 2 hours. Okay, so don't waste an opportunity to study. And also, when you know that you can do more, don't settle for less. But at the same time, don't set limits beyond what you can bear. And also, don't go faster than what you can sustain long term. We're going to get somewhere else in here a report that supports the idea that a little bit over a long time is better than a lot that doesn't last for very long. Okay, so he does not burden himself with what is overbearing to him out of fear of boredom, of losing what he has gained. Okay, so don't burn out. Don't let yourself get bored. Do enough that you can sustain it, sustain the study, and sustain the interest. And this is going to vary according to different people and conditions. People have to go at their own pace, and you need to teach people at their own pace. If the student, and remember, when it comes to the Quran, retention throughout your life is a goal, not just memorizing a page. You want to memorize the page, you want to learn what it means, and you want to be able to keep it for the rest of your life. Memorizing a page, not knowing what it means, and forgetting it the next day, you got nothing really. Okay? Yeah, you're going to get the thawab of having done it in the practice, but you really kind of missed the point, because the point of memorizing the Quran is that it stays with you and that you understand what it means so that you can put it into practice. If the student reaches the place where the sheikh usually sits and does not find him there, he waits patiently for him and he stays close to his door. Okay, maybe the sheikh is 10 minutes late, maybe he got caught in traffic, maybe his alarm didn't go off in time, maybe. Okay, so you sit around a little bit waiting for the sheikh to show up. The student does not skip his daily lessons unless out of concern that the sheikh has an aversion to a given lesson for some reason. Okay, so suppose that you have a lesson with a sheikh and it's a daily lesson or it's a consistent scheduled lesson. Don't ever skip one unless you absolutely need to. Okay, so the student does not skip his daily lessons unless out of concern that the sheikh has an aversion to a given lesson for some reason. Okay, so you have a scheduled lesson with the sheikh, go to the lesson. If you show up and you see that the sheikh is in a weird, strange mood compared to how he normally is, go ahead and have your lesson. If you see that he's really distracted, then you might want to ask him to excuse you for that day. So anyways, So you don't skip a daily lesson unless out of concern that the sheikh has an aversion, since the sheikh knows, or since the student knows, the sheikh's preference for being read to at one time and not another. Okay, so if the sheikh gives you a time, stick to it, because the sheikh is going to be picking the times that are going to be best for communicating knowledge to you. So take the time, don't miss it unless you absolutely have to. If the student finds the sheikh sleeping or occupied with something important, he does not seek permission to enter. Instead, he waits until the sheikh awakens or completes his tasks. Yeah, you've been given a time, and all things being equal, you really should have that time, and the sheikh knows that, but perhaps the sheikh has a reason that he has to put something else in its place, in your place. As long as this isn't a regular occurrence, it shouldn't be a problem, right? All right, otherwise he simply departs. If it doesn't look like the sheikh is going to wake up or he's not going to complete the task, just leave. Come back at the next time. It is better to be patient, just as Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma and others were. Now the thing about waking up the sheikh, some sheikhs actually schedule their lessons so that their first student is their alarm clock. So if your sheikh gives you permission to do that, do take advantage of it, because the early time tends to be when people are at their best. Alright, so if the sheikh is giving you permission, it's because he knows that this is best. Alright, the student should take it upon himself to strive hard to achieve all that he can while he is free of responsibility and energetic. The body strong, the mind alert and occupied by few things before the hurdles of heroism and high rank come. And before you have a career, and before you have a family and kids, before you have a lot of cats you have to feed. Before, okay? So when you are relatively young and carefree, you really need to give it your all. Okay, and this was mentioned earlier on. The commander of the faithful, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, said, become learned, a faqih, before you become a master. Okay? Obtain deep understanding of religious matters before you become someone who is responsible to others. Meaning, strive to attain complete competence while you are subordinates before you become masters or leaders. When you become masters or leaders with a following of students, you will be prevented from further learning. Okay, with a following of students or other people who are under your care, whom you are responsible for, like employees, like a spouse, like children. You will be prevented, all right? When you get busied with these things, you will be prevented from further learning because of your high rank and numerous preoccupations. This is the meaning of Imam Shafi'i's statement, and may Allah be pleased with him, become a faqih. And when someone of that generation says fiqh, what they tend to be talking about is fiqh in its linguistic sense, which is the deep understanding of religion, which facilitates one's path through the dunya in order to ensure their success in the akhirah. And this is a type of definition that you're going to find in books like Ihya Ulumuddin, where he reminds us that this was the original meaning of fiqh. And you'll find it in books like Mukhtasar Minhaj al-Qasidin and others. So anyways, become someone who has deep learning and understanding of the religion before you become a leader, since when you are a leader, there is no path to becoming a faqih, because you're going to be busy and you're going to be responsible for other people. I know this segment has gone a little bit long, but I wanted to try to finish as much of the adab as a student as I could, and with your permission, inshallah, I'm going to finish it right now. Yeah, I know you can't give me your permission because it's kind of like a one-way feedback system. So anyways, if you need to run, you can always catch this later on YouTube. Just try to make a mark of where you are in the stream. So anyways, Imam al-Nawawi then says, the student should make his recitation from the sheikh early. I'm just making sure I didn't skip a page. Okay, inshallah I didn't. The student should make his recitation with the Shaykh early at the beginning of the day because of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, O Allah, bless my nation in its earliness. And as we all have probably experienced at times in our life, when you get up early, great things happen. You feel this amazing sense of accomplishment, and nothing breeds more accomplishment like past accomplishment, right? So you start the day off doing good works that then build upon each other. Okay, so perhaps this is part of the answer, Allah's answer to this dua. Oh Allah, bless my nation in its earliness. And that dua in this prophetic hadith is one of the reasons why we prefer to try to do our lessons early in the morning. Now, without the religious side of things, I'm sure that like I mentioned, we feel a purity of heart and a wakefulness, a vigor that we don't feel later on in the day. I mean, after all, we just got up and we're rested, right? And that very first cup of coffee or tea that we have has an effect on us that the second, third, and the 20th cup don't. So anyways, seek out the morning, because that's when you and the Shaykh are going to be at your best during the day. And the student should be mindful to recite what he has memorized. The student should be mindful to recite what he has memorized. The student should be mindful to recite what he has memorized. Pretend that I just repeated that 1,000 times to make sure that we don't forget it. Because we know through it, unless you have a photographic memory or one of those other fantastic memories like a memory palace or whatever, we memorize things and we forget them quite quickly and easily if we don't repeat them a bunch. So the student should be mindful to recite what he has memorized so that he doesn't forget it. And also, that's in general, but also when you sit with your Shaykh, recite to him what you just memorized to make sure that you got it right. He should not give someone else his turn, since it is offensive to give preference to someone else when it comes to deeds that draw one close to Allah, religious instruction, learning the Quran being one of them. Okay, so he should not give someone else his turn in the line, since it is offensive to give preference to someone else when it comes to deeds that draw one close to Allah, although it is recommended to give such preference when it comes to personal interests, like letting your dad go first, letting your mom go first. By the way, I mentioned there are going to be some cases, some situations that the books do mention where the Shaykh should give preference to other people. Like he knows that they don't have any time and they came from a long way away. So sometimes scarcity of resources would be a reason for us to give someone preference. But as the general rule, and you can use your discretion on this one, and when you actually apply it, don't give someone else preference when it comes to deeds regarding the afterlife. Put yourself first. When it comes to dunyawi affairs, you're free to do it. And something that Sheikh Faraz Rabbani once pointed out to me is that giving preference to the elderly, especially if they're your relatives, and to senior scholars is part of the affairs of the afterlife. I hope that I gave proper attribution, and I hope that I conveyed what he said correctly. And my apologies to Sheikh Faraz if I was incorrect, and my apologies to whoever actually said it if it wasn't him. Okay, if the Sheikh sees advantage in preferring certain times over others because of a legal reason, and he alludes to it, his order should be followed. Now we're at the end of this chapter. The student is obliged and is highly advised to heed that he not harbor envy towards his peers or anyone else for that matter because of some good quality that Allah the Generous has given one. Just notice the language, a good quality that Allah the Generous has given him. Imam al-Nawawi is already setting us up on how to purify our hearts on this. Okay, if Allah is generous and He's given something to someone else, then hey, what's to stop Him from giving it to us, right? And where that good quality the other person have come? Oh, it's from Allah's generosity. It's not something that that person actually did, so I shouldn't be envious of him. You can't really be envious of Allah on this one, right? Okay, that's not the right way that you would approach Allah on this, but notice the wording, it's awesome. Because of some good quality that Allah the Generous has given him, likewise the student should not wax proud over what he himself achieves. We explained before that this is also part of the teacher's etiquette. So don't get proud about something that you achieve. Well, why? Because it's a gift from Allah. You didn't actually do it. Allah did it for you. It's not something you're doing for Allah. It's something that Allah did for you. So how can you take pride in that? Okay, so every time we find ourselves doing a good deed, we thank Allah for gifting it to us, and we ask Him that He gives us more. We don't say, oh wow, hey Allah, look at how much I'm giving to you. This is hubris, and it's not the right way to go about things. I mean, obviously it's an incredible amount of sincerity because you're behaving as though you actually can give something to Allah. How can you give Him something that He created? It's His. I mean, maybe He would look at it as something kind of cute, like how we look at our own children if they come and they give us $1 that we just gave them. Right? It's kind of cute, but still, coming from an adult, no, that doesn't make sense. Okay, so yeah, I mean, imagine someone giving you back property they just took from you. Anyway, okay, the student should not get proud over what he himself achieves, and we explained before that this is also part of the teacher's etiquette. How so? Because he mentioned about how a teacher shouldn't get upset if a student goes and he studies with someone else, and the teacher shouldn't get upset if the student actually ends up surpassing him. And there are cases where a sheikh teaches a student, the student excels, surpasses the sheikh, and the sheikh goes and he then studies with his former student. Really, in the end, there's no us, there's no me in this. It's all Allah. That's what we're seeking here. The way for the student to remove pride is by remembering that his achievement did not occur through his own power and strength, rather it was only through Allah's grace, and as such the student should not be proud of something he did not produce, something that Allah Most High placed in him. If you didn't do it, how can you take ownership of it, right? The way to remove envy is to know with certainty that it was the wisdom of Allah Most High that brought a good trait to a person. It's Allah's property. He can give it to whomever He wants. And we know that Allah, as a general rule, acts wisely and in the best interests of us. So if He's given a good trait or property to someone else, it has to be that there's a wisdom in it, even if we don't see it. There has to be a wisdom in it. Thank Allah for it too. So one should never object to it, nor should one dislike wisdom that Allah Most High willed, and thus He Himself did not dislike. So if Allah has given it to someone out of His wish and His will, then who are we to object? We might not see the specific reasoning behind it, but we have to trust that it conforms with Allah's general pattern of doing what's in our best interest. This is the end of today's segment, and it's also the end of the chapter on the etiquette of teachers and students. And inshallah, in the next segment, we're going to get into, I think, the biggest chapter of the book, and it's the etiquette of the bearers of the Quran. And inshallah, we will begin this in the next segment. Thanks for listening. Make sure you share this to other people so they benefit. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.